All right, so today we're going to talk about building muscle, and this is going to be part one of a multiple part video series that we are going to be pretty much quickly touching on all things hypertrophy for the most part. So for this first section, we're going to be talking about 3 mechanisms of muscular hypertrophy, which is, like I said, just kind of a fancy way of saying building muscle. So let's go ahead and get started. So different questions we're going to answer throughout these videos is going to be like, so what's hypertrophy? What are some hypertrophy mechanisms? So basically thinking about ways that we can go about inducing hypertrophy. Some programming strategies that we can follow to help elicit some hypertrophy, as well as some other training considerations that are going to help you out. Just maybe some things that you haven't thought of, things that can come into play that can be definitely beneficial for your quest for building muscle. So let's go ahead and get this thing rolling. So muscle hypertrophy, we're thinking muscular enlargement, right? In this case, we're looking at the increase in cross-sectional area of the existing fibers. So just think about this as being like muscular bulk, right? What the girthiness of the muscle is, okay? So that's, kind of what people are going to be after for this. There's also hyperplasia, which is basically the increase in fibers because of the basically the fiber splitting that happens. So a fiber will split and then it'll start to grow off into its own fiber and then continue to grow from there. This is thought to be a little bit less of a contributor to overall hypertrophy, a little bit more common in animals. It's hard to measure in humans, and this can be the case in humans. It has been shown to happen, but it might just be a smaller contributor. So I think that for the sake of this, the biggest thing that we're probably mostly concerned about is going to be just, again, the overall muscular enlargement of the fibers that we already have. And I think if we kind of at least just understand that, then we're going to be in a good spot. So mechanisms of muscular hypertrophy. So we have 3 of them. So we're going to go through and kind of talk about each of these. So the first one being mechanical tension, the next one being metabolic stress, and then the last one being muscular damage. And we'll talk about why there might be a little bit of an asterisk on there. So, all right, so the first one being mechanical tension. So if you ever hear mechanical tension, think about this as being the tension that's placed on the muscle from a combination of a large stretch and the amount of force that's being exerted, right? Or the force that you have to be able to overcome. So in the example, or in these pictures that we have over here, we're thinking, all right, well, Ronnie Coleman has a ton of weight on here, therefore, and he's going down into, give or take, a full squat, right? So his muscles are going to be put through a large stretch and then a shortening with a lot of force on top of it, right? So that's probably the easiest way to think about mechanical tension. In this case, we're thinking, again, generally speaking, we're thinking heavier weights, lower reps. So for example, it might be something that is, 4 sets of 5, might be even a little bit lower than that. So maybe 6 sets of 3, so on and so forth. Okay. Again, with this, the idea is that we want to be able to get a large stretch. So by going through a full range of motion during your exercises, you are going to be able to elicit that. And then again, with the force that's going to be on top of that, you're going to have to exert. Then we're truly targeting the first mechanism being mechanical tension. All right, so the next one's going to be metabolic stress. Okay, so metabolic stress is basically just going to be the buildup of metabolites from intense, like prolonged efforts, right? So think about this as being like the burn, right? Feel the burn. So think about like when you are training, you're working out, whatever you're doing, and those times when you start to get that real burning sensation. A lot of times it's going to be during activities that are going to be prolonged and that are going to be probably high reps, right? And for the sake of this presentation, we're going to pretty much just be referring to resistance training and not any other factors for the most part, but so that's kind of an easy way to look at it there. So think about feeling the burn. We're thinking high amount of reps and getting very close to failure. So this might be, bicep curls. This might be your leg curls. This might be tricep extensions. It can be anything, right? Bench press. You can do and elicit metabolic stress in any exercise that you do. the reason I mentioned those quote unquote easier exercises, because this works very well for things that are typically low risk, right? If you think about doing a exercise that is low risk, so say like a bicep curl, and you do a ton of reps, so 20, 25, 30, chances are it's not going to be a life or death situation once you get to failure. On the flip side of the coin, if you are doing, say, squats, back squat, to getting close to failure and doing 25 to 30 reps, and you maybe don't have a spotter for whatever reason, then it can get a little riskier for that. So, but generally speaking, again, we're thinking metabolic stress being a buildup. You're feeling the burn. Typically, high amount of reps, getting close to failure is going to elicit that mechanism. You can also do blood flow restriction type stuff. For especially in the rehab setting. So basically what happens is that when you restrict a little bit of blood flow into whatever area, so if we look at this picture over here, she's restricting some blood flow into the legs. Basically what's going to be happening is that you are able to accumulate some of those metabolites and basically get that burning sensation without a lot of weight, right? So this works pretty well in the rehab setting because typically if something is injured, you're not able to typically if something is injured, you're not able to produce a lot of force because something is injured. It's not up to its full capability, but we still need that area to grow. So how do we do that, right? And that's one strategy that some people have used to be able to do that. So, all right, so that's metabolic stress. All right, so the next one's going to be muscular damage. In this case, we can just think about as microscopic damage to the actual tissue. So eccentric contractions have been kind of related to, or kind of been the thing to, I guess, point the finger at in terms of what causes the most damage. And again, eccentric contraction, think about the lengthening portion. So you're going with the resistance versus against it. So this would be on the lowering of a squat or a lowering of the bench press. So that has been, again, if you have something that has a large emphasis on the eccentric portion of the lift, chances are you're going to be pretty sore. But there has been some cool stuff that has looked at implementing a eccentric based program and have been able to show that there's been some pretty good muscular gain from doing something like that. Physiologically, there's some stuff that's going on that's kind of beyond the scope of this, but like protein synthesis, satellite cell signaling, and stuff like that can be contributors to actual muscular growth. So that stuff's going to be kind of happening when there is damage present. It's kind of up for debate a little bit on, if this is a huge contributor to your muscles actually growing. Maybe it's just a byproduct of the previous two mechanisms, so mechanical tension and metabolic stress, and maybe the muscular damage is just because of those things, right? Possibly. The jury's still out a little bit. There has been some things that have shown that you can still get muscular damage by doing cycling type stuff, and you can still get hypertrophy from doing cycling type activities, especially in those who are untrained. But there's also some things that show that there's been high amount of damage in basically like downhill type running, just because there's a large eccentric portion to the activity. But just because you do a bunch of downhill running doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get absolutely jacked, right? There's different physiological things that are going on with running versus resistance training. So this is a little bit of a gray area in terms of the reasons why muscle grows debate, but I think it probably has something to do with it a little bit. So you can't really count it out for that. So go ahead and hit subscribe and check out the next video, as we're going to talk about programming for muscular hypertrophy.